Hello, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, thanks.
We can hear you, Robert.
Fantastic. Okay, it's right on the dot. It's 7 o'clock. This is a picture of the ice cream you missed out on if you weren't there. Fun day this past Saturday. Jolie and Cecil made a batch. There were a few other people that chipped in, Becky and Steve. Anyhow, welcome to our monthly Q&A. Glad you could make it. Primarily, if you drive around the highways, this is what you're seeing, the yellow flowers of the yellow sweet clover. Just gotten so hot here inside, I'm kind of sweating. We haven't turned the air on yet. But this is our general panel, President Ed Darlington, Matt Brandis. It's our first program chair, in charge of the program, Cecil Sweeney, the librarian, who's probably on with Jolie. Chad Gilliland, who's in charge of honey plants. Our secretary, Janet Campbell. I'm the treasurer. Jolie Weiner's on. She's in charge of youth scholarship. Andy Novacek, he's in charge of the military veteran liaison. Cheryl Burkhead's our editor. I think Cheryl's on. So CB. Becky may join us later. She had another activity. And Jay Francis, our special events fun day coordinator, who is just coming off the big weekend of the fun day. So welcome, everybody. I'm just pointing out where I live, although this is dated May 31st, it doesn't count the last day of the month. But we had over 8 inches of rain for the month of May. Our normal average is 5. I think we had probably over 10. Count the last day of getting 2+ inches of rain. So we've had a lot of rain. This is, although this is the drought report for June 2nd, it covers, the data is through May 31st. You can see the eastern half of the state, a third of it, at least, is not reporting any drought. But out in western Kansas, they have extreme and exceptional drought. So our state's not out of the drought, but we are. Quick review of, that's May's temperature outlook. I should have changed that to June in the top line, but it's June actually. And you can see that they're reporting above average in the orange temperature, but it's not as bad as it looks like it's going to be for the Ohio Valley, which is going to be most above average. That's the dark red. And to get started with the first question, this came in from Nancy Chapman, and I apologize for getting the notification out so late, because I just did it this afternoon or this morning. And Nancy wrote, she goes, if it's lightly sprinkling rain, can I check my new hives? And she added on there to move drawn out frames out and outer frames in if it's the only time I have for another week. And the last time she looked was a couple weeks ago. So basically, it sounds like she's manipulating her frames. And Nancy, if you're on, you're welcome to chime in anytime. Is this your, if you are on, Nancy, are you dealing with one brood box or your second brood box?
This is the second one, so I want to get them move if there's anything, I want to put the super on, but I just need to know, because it seems like every time that I have time, then it looks like it's going to rain, and not pouring rain, but it's just like sprinkling. And I just didn't know if they can get wet.
Of course, it's going to rain. it's nice out right now, but yes, when you get a chance, if it's light rain, you can, but anybody here would like to answer this question? I can see Jolie and I can see Cheryl.
If the bees are flying, you can look at them. Though I will say when it was raining last week, Cecil had to get hives ready to take to the fun day, and he was out there in the rain. So bees are able to dry off. So I don't know. You know, I don't know. When you have a lot of hives and you don't have a lot of choices of when you can work them, you kind of work in all kinds of weather. So
They may be a little more defensive, so have a good lit smoker and dress appropriately.
Okay, thanks.
Sometimes
Personally,
you
I
gotta
don't-
do what you gotta do.
Yeah. Personally, I don't like getting wet, so but I have probably more time. But I'm not working. I can pick another one. But it sounds like you're just not having good luck with the weather, Nancy. Yeah, if you just looked 2 weeks ago, look again. You don't have to take the frames out per se, but if you at least pop the lid and pop the inner cover, and see where they're drawing the wax and how far they're getting along.
Okay,
yeah, if you just have a couple frames that aren't drawn out, we just move them in. It's warm enough now. You don't have to worry about split and brood up, and you can just move the undrawn ones in and stick your queen excluder and your super on one super on if it's foundation, more supers if it's already drawn comb.
okay, thank you.
Great, thank you. Okay. And then Marcia Harmon had a question. I guess she's in a beekeeping group that she follows. Someone is talking about using powdered sugar as control for varroa mites. She watched the YouTube video about it. They were dusting every frame that had bees on it with powdered sugar. And the explanation on the video was that the bees will groom off the powdered sugar and the mites along with it. She says it seems ridiculously time consuming. You have to pull and dust each frame, and she hasn't heard anyone in our group talk about this. Has anyone heard of this as a possible control? And she'd like to hear our thoughts on it. So
I thought you'd chuckle about this, Robert.
Actually, Marion Ellis, when he was at the University of Nebraska, and Paula Macedo, who worked with ticks, and Nick Aliano, they actually did research on this, and it does not work. Was the reply to their research. And there is someone on the Missouri side and the Midwestern beekeepers who swears by this method of control, and someone ought to tape her lips shut. So anyway, that's my opinion.
Anybody that can get on and video can put a lot of bad information out there. So this is just a good example of be wary of where you get your information. And anybody with a video and get on YouTube and do this kind of stuff. So
Marcia, that's why you don't really hear us talk about it.
I kind of thought that was going to be the answer, but I was intrigued because I really would rather do something IPM, but I'm like, this seems so far-fetched that I'm going to throw it out there for tonight.
Well, it's been a long time since I've read those papers, but I believe the problem is that they describe the powdered sugar as an inert dust. And you don't get all the mites like you would if you did a kill with,
Right, and it's not killing mites. All it's doing is making the bees shed the mites. So what good does that do? So when the mites, so let's just say you have a screen bottom board and the mite falls to the ground. Where does the mite go?
just gets back on.
Right. Yeah, it gets back on. So
And
what's the point?
Then you've got all your mites that are not hatched that are under capped brood.
Right.
I mean, I
So
know
the whole,
you're doing it repetitively, but you're not really taking care of your mites.
well, that's what I thought. The whole thing was, I think that I continued to watch the video and I was just like, my jaw was dropped going, this can't be. One time in the spring, one time in the summer, and 2 times in the fall. Okay, every single frame, this video sprinkled with a good old fashioned.
And mites crawl.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what I thought. So I'm like, how were they? You can't, all
Mites
they've done is
crawl.
drop
We
them
had
to the ground.
Right. We've had Jerry Hayes at our Kansas honey producers meeting, and he once said that one of his students had brought in it was a petri dish or something that was full of varroa mites, and it wasn't 20 minutes before they'd crawled across the floor and were crawling up his leg. So
Yeah, okay. That's what
Oh,
I
not-
thought. Is you're not getting rid of the mites, you're just making them shake them off and they're still there.
and that's why we use the sugar roll method to test for mites. Because yes, it'll knock them off, but it doesn't kill the mites or kill the bees. So, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well,
okay.
a sugar roll too, you're really shaking the bees, whereas the mites are tucked under the underbody of it, and they're really attached good and hard. So while you might knock some of them off with a sugar roll, just sprinkling on top of the hive doesn't begin to do the things that you would with a sugar roll. And so the evidence has been that it is not a good control method. Just walk away from it. Look for something else.
Well, that's what I thought, but I just wanted to hear your thoughts on it.
No, that's good. Good question. Okay. We move on. Cindy, who had the tag "whose hives all swarmed," sent in a question. She wrote, "When one opens a hive, is there a quick way to judge if there are too many bees and that a split is in order? Counting the frame tops covered with bees, question mark." I just happened to take a picture of this morning when I was out with someone looking at bees. So there's an example. Again, when one opens a hive, is there a quick way to judge if there are too many bees and that a split is in order, counting the frame tops covered with bees? And she also added, is there a rough guideline for how many frames of brood to aim for each month during the spring before the nectar flows? I think what I'll do is back to this question here so we can address that. Who would like to take this question on? Is there a quick way to judge if you have too many bees and you need to do a divide? Do you count the frame tops covered with bees, or what way do you judge? Ed, what do you do?
Well, I think depending on the time of the year, yeah, depending on the time of the year, you can't tell by looking at the top of the frames. You have to actually count the frames of brood, so you have to pull them out. So in April, the beginning of April, if we have more than 4 or 5 frames of brood, we take everything else out and make a split. Middle of April, if we have more than 6 frames of brood, we take everything out and make a split. So end of April, if we have more than 7 or 8 frames of brood, we take everything out. Because the whole reason to make a split is to control the swarming so your bees don't swarm. It's not just to keep making splits because you have a lot of bees in your hive. Because right now you want a lot of bees in your hive, so they'll bring in a honey crop for you.
Right, but I guess I was thinking, you never know exactly when that honey flow is going to start. Sometimes I've seen people open it up and say, oh, that's too many bees. We probably need to do a split.
but you can't tell. You can't even tell if your hive is swarmed just by opening up your hive. You
Right, I
can't, if
realize
you've
that.
got 6 hives, you can't, and you've got a swarm hanging there and you know it's one of them. You can't even open all 6 hives and tell which ones they came out of, because you should have a lot of bees this time of year, but that doesn't mean you should make a split.
So could you repeat that about how many frames of brood to aim for in, what would you say, beginning of April, mid-April, end of April? What was that, 4, 5 to 6, 7 to 8? Is that what you said?
That's what I said. That's our rule of thumb,
Okay,
that if the first week of April, first or second week of April, we have more than 4 frames of brood, we take everything else out. So if we've got 9 frames of brood, I'm pulling 5 frames of brood from that hive and I'm leaving 4 frames in. The middle of April, like April 15th to the 20th, we'll leave 6 frames in. And we'll pull everything out. Sometimes we go back more than once and pull brood out of hives if we think they're getting too strong. But the whole key to beekeeping is to keep your hives. You want enough bees. The whole key to beekeeping is to keep your hives from swarming. That's the key, because you want good, strong hives when the honey flow comes on. And so when our honey flow starts the last week or so of May, you want your hives to be strong enough, but not so strong that they swarm. And it's just a learning curve. It's not something that I think someone could tell you, but you
what,
know, part of beekeeping is you just have to get in there and look. You can't just sit at the entrance and count bees and know how strong your hive is.
so what's a good amount to have in mid-May?
In mid-May, we want a lot. You know, we want, you're getting close to the honey flow, so you want you know, 8, 10, 12 frames of brood in that hive.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
So that was the second question. Is there a rough guideline for how many frames of brood to aim for each month during the spring for the nectar flow?
That's so different each year that it's very hard to tell.
Yeah,
I look for other signs besides that. I mean, you look for queen cells, you look for other indicators that they're a swarm. And typically, when you start seeing those signs, it's almost too late to change their mind. You know, about the only thing you can do is pull a split at that time. But there are other signs more than just the bees. And so it's a matter of, like has been said, you look in for other indicators besides just the amount of bees. How much space is there? It's not, I mean, if you're, and how much empty space is there, or they filled it with honey or nectar rather, not honey. And so if they don't have space to lay more eggs and to continue to grow, you're gonna force them to swarm. So it's not just the number of bees, it's the number of bees plus open frames and lack of queen cells.
So if you have two deeps, and it looks like they've been putting a lot of nectar or sugar water or something, can you pull some of those out and extract them and put them back in?
If it's sugar water, you don't want to extract that. If
I
they're
don't want to
they're
keep it.
filling up the bottom with honey, you need to put a super on.
And also depends on what you use for mite treatments, because some of those get into the wax and you don't want to eat that honey. That's not for human consumption.
Right. I wasn't wanting to consume it. I just wanted to make sure the queen had enough space to lay.
Yeah. And so that leads into your last question was, is that number affected by the queen's age? As you're saying, older queens being more inclined to swarm, question. So maybe aim for less brood with an older queen? Cheryl, can you add to that? Because
I'm quiet because you know how I'm the swarm queen.
well, Well, I think she and I both agree. It doesn't matter if you have an old queen or if you have a this year's queen or a young queen. Sometimes those workers just are going to swarm anyway. So swarm control is a big issue, and especially this year, we're going to have a few more questions on swarms. It's if you can, I was telling someone the other day, you'd be a millionaire when you come up with the plan, the way to control swarms, because nobody's been able to do it. Jolie has the best, I think, in that they, they go by the number of brood during the weeks of April, because you do want to build up your population so that they're ready to bring all that nectar in for the honey flow. But it seems like even these past years, we get an earlier honey flow, or we get warm weather early, and then we get cold. And this year we're getting cold and warm, 4 or 5 days.
And when the bees are confined in the hive on those rainy days, especially hives that are just socked full of brood and lots of bees, because they aren't able to hang out and relieve the pressure. The minute the rain stops, hives start swarming if there's swarm cells in there. But I also want to say, someone made the comment to me today that it doesn't matter how many supers you have on, your hives. They thought that putting supers on would keep their hives from swarming. And
that doesn't work either.
That doesn't work. I mean, I've had people tell me they put supers on in April to keep their hives from swarming. It's like, no, that's like an old wives' tale or something. I don't know where they came up with that. But
our weather is a big impact. I can have first-year queens swarm, but they're not as likely to swarm as anything that's a second-year queen or older. They're here to procreate. They're not here to make the beekeeper honey. And so when we get a good nectar flow and we have plenty of forage for a colony to survive on, that is the best time for a colony to swarm, is when things are plentiful. We try to get them switched over to hoarding behaviors. If I had like Jim Kelly out in Western Kansas, where I could time my brood buildup with a crop that's going to hopefully guarantee to provide me this horrendous nectar flow for a longer period of time, I would think it would be a little bit easier to manage. But our nectar flows in Kansas, sometimes we don't even know what they're working. We can have this stop, start nectar flows. And it's kind of it differs from yard to yard to know what they're working on. My own experience, I did a lot of splits in my backyard where I really watch those hives and can see what's going on. I've had about half the amount of swarming in my backyard after doing strong splits in early April as I've had thus far. But that being said, all of the colonies that have a second-year queen, I'm now starting to see swarm activity, and they're big primary swarms that are going out. And did I get into them very often? No. Once I super with drawn honey supers, they fill up 2 honey supers and I've got 60 pounds of honey and they want to requeen, they're going to do it. And I'm not going to haul all those and stack all those supers and keep fighting them to prevent them from swarming, when I don't really want to go into next year with a 3-year-old queen. Now, if they don't requeen, then I can graft and I can make replacement queens, or I can do combines or stuff like that. But everybody's management's just a little different. But Jolie's right. We do splits in the spring to keep them from building up so rapidly that they swarm on you real early, and you don't have the workers that you need to bring you in any type of your nectar flow. We were lucky this year. We had an early nectar flow. Most of my colonies are on black locust, so I had everything timed perfectly for black locust. And so I had lots of black locust honey come in. But, now everything's kind of rainy and, it's washing out nectar out of the yellow sweet clover. They are working yellow sweet clover. I'm not sure. I mean, the temperatures were great today, but we keep having these rains every evening. And then we have some days where they're locked up all day when these colonies are really strong. That's going to precipitate some issues too. So yeah, like Robert said, if we had a magic answer for it gets frustrating for new beekeepers. Once you get a drawn honey super, you'll see how much difference it makes to relieve pressure in the brood nest when they start packing in stuff, because they always want to plug out the brood nest on you. So once you are successful in getting a couple of drawn supers, you'll see what a difference that makes.
I know when I was a librarian, I tried to get people to read books that were in our library so they get good information. And the one thing I could never accomplish was to get the bees to read the same books we did.
Right.
They have a mind of their own. And at times you realize that. And so you can do these things about keeping space, keeping enough open, frames with drawn comb. You can do the other things, control the brood and whatever. And some years they're just going to swarm. There's nothing you can do about it. And other years we have less swarming issues. We have other issues. We're always going to have issues we need to try to figure out. And so, yes, you need to do due diligence and do the things that we know to do, but don't try to own everything that they do, because they're not reading the same books we are.
Great. Thank you, Ed. Appreciate that. Yeah. If you can figure out a way to quit control swarming that nobody has. So. That's all the questions we had this evening so far. So we could just make the rest of it a discussion. There was a comment in the chat from Jerry Sellers, says, our question is, what can we do better next year? They had 2 hives. They split them in April to try to control the swarming. And they now have 2 swarms. One came from the newly split hive. So they only started beekeeping last year, and they don't have a ready supply of built-out frames, drawn comb. But we did try to put in empty frames and mix our frames with brood and honey. We limited the queen cells to 4 to 5 in one hive. The new queen seems to be doing fine. The second hive only swarmed last week, so they haven't been able to check on them, on the queen in the new hive, second hive. But again, their question was, how can we do this better next year? How can they do that better next year?
They could learn to control the weather. As much luck.
And you may wonder how we know they swarmed. We actually saw both swarms. And Jolie, I don't know if it was you who said it, but yeah, right after a couple of rainy days, the next sunny day, that's when they swarmed.
Yeah.
I just want to clarify one thing. When some of us answer, like Cheryl and Robert, Stephen, Becky, or Cecil and I, we are talking about 10 frame equipment. And I know there are a lot of people out there with there's a lot of 8 frame equipment out there, and there's a lot of people using honey supers instead of hive bodies. There's a lot of people out there with Wari hives and
long Langstroth
and the
good point. We
tap. And so
yeah.
And so especially those 8 frame hives, oh my gosh. And if you have a feeder in there, a frame feeder, you've only got 7 frames in that hive. And so you guys are gonna really have to be on top of the swarming, because if you've got 2 deeps, you're short 5 frames. And so, that's really a huge difference if you've got a frame feeder in there. So I just want to say, when we're talking about 10 frames, we're talking about 20 frames, and you guys are talking about, 16 or 15 if you've got a frame feeder in there.
Jolie, and I always thought they were worse with mediums too, because I took over some friends' hives.
I agree. Yeah.
I had some
So-
friends' hives that she was running mediums, and I was trying to get them eventually so I could switch them over to honey supers, and pop out those brood frames out of the mediums and put new foundation in them and convert them to honey supers. And oh my gosh, when you do a hive inspection, there's so many more frames that you have to inspect when you're looking at, because we usually run 3 mediums for winter, and they're just more prone. I know I had so much more problems with the ones that were running mediums with swarming early in the season. So for what that's worth, like you said, with the 8 frame equipment too. But yeah, I mean, making hard splits in the spring, and then just because they swarm once doesn't mean they're done, Jerry. I hate to say that, but I have a lot of problem with that. I mean, if you actually witness the colony swarm and it's the primary, the first swarm, I have enough extra equipment, extra bees and stuff that, you can go in there and you can try to systematically cut out all but the best 2. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't. Jolie always taught us when I was a beginning beekeeper, if you saw it swarm, just wait 21 days and go back in and check for a laying queen. But then I still have after swarms, and those after swarms are usually, about a week after the first one. So I'm just saying, I'll have colonies maybe swarm twice, and it gets really frustrating.
Well, because we didn't have, drawn frames, we didn't know if that was hurting us. So we were just sticking empty frames in there.
With foundation?
Yeah.
No,
I mean,
it was the yellow, empty.
Just foundation. And
Yeah.
the bees don't see foundation as added space.
Right.
But if you do that early in the spring, and if you're feeding maybe a little syrup, not too fast, just with 3 holes, they'll tend to draw those frames out for you. But sometimes they're just like, no, we're not doing this.
One question we had is, should we have split the one because the second hive that split was from this one hive that we were most concerned with. It's a really aggressive hive. Should we have split it 3 instead of 2?
So we go by frames of brood. So if I split a hive and I'm starting a new
Colony.
nuke or whatever, we just start those in 3. So if I pull 6 frames of brood out of one hive, I'm making 2 splits.
Yeah,
2
and we
putting a
didn't
queen
have,
in each one. So
yeah,
I've had people say they'll split one hive body and another hive body. Well, they don't count how many frames of brood are in each one. They're just doing these box splits, I call them. You have to look in there and see what's in there to know what to do. I don't know.
we balanced it.
yeah, and we did try to balance it, and yeah, we didn't have an overabundance of brood frames, so we couldn't have done 3 based on that, Jolie.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're splitting from the original parent hive, we're trying to teach you to leave enough frames of brood so that the old parent colony will be successful in its buildup and will bring you a honey crop if it doesn't swarm as well. So we don't split the parent colony so severely that it won't have time to grow and bring in a crop. And that's why Jolie says, 3 frames of brood, typically the first week of April, and so on as you get closer to our main nectar flow.
All right, thanks.
there is a benefit to having a swarm, but earlier in the season, not later in the season. And that is you get a new queen and they have time to recover for the nectar flow. But the later it gets in the season, you know, the less chance of getting the honey crop there is. So.
And we didn't have very nice weather in early April if they were to swarm. And
Yeah.
then there's the issues of even if they swarmed, we don't have a decent amount of drones out there and decent weather that they get mated well. So then you're left with, you know, how good a queen do you have and how well is she mated sometimes.
And swarming season, you know, was generally late this year, like everything else.
Right.
Blooms were, you know, they're 2 weeks late, so later than usual. So it's an off season. I don't know what else to say, but you know.
Every year's the off season.
Every year is off.
I had a primary swarm today in another yard, and you know, most of those over there are sitting with two honey supers full of honey. So, you know, they got 60 pounds on them unless they take some of it back. You know, it's like they're going to do what they're going to do.
Yeah. It's just a lot of energy. If you have only a couple hives, it's, you know, you can do better control than somebody that's got a whole lot, like myself. So, a couple of the other comments, Dwayne commented, he's finding that trying to prevent bees from swarming is a lot like preventing lettuce from bolting. And he had nowhere near full frames of brood the 1st of April. He had plenty of space and they still swarmed. And curious though, Dwayne, what kind of hives are you keeping? 10 frame, 8 frame?
Yes, they were 8 frame.
Okay. And he also commented, I had a hive swarm out while he was standing near it. And like they say, they poured out faster than you think they could come out. As a matter of curiosity, he looked in to see what was happening. He saw eggs standing out of the bottom of cells, and that the queen had stopped laying before she left. So he commented that. But yes, that doesn't sound like she had much time.
Yeah, Dwayne, I had a similar with my observation hive. I knew it was going to swarm, but I also had eggs in the bottom of the cell. She was still laying the day she swarmed.
That's what I usually experience as well.
Yeah. Now that doesn't mean that they haven't, you know, she hasn't necessarily slimmed down, but.
And this is Matt Brandis speaking. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay. Great. Anybody else? Questions about swarms? We're still having them. At least you get a new queen. That's all I can say. That's a benefit.
And we have plenty of
drones.
We have plenty of drones. Just hope she picks a nice mating day.
Yeah, and the swarming's not over. I went through a couple more hives today and I was knocking queen cells down like crazy again.
Yep.
Wow. Yeah, such an odd year. It's not normally like this every year. Is it?
Usually it calms down by June.
Yeah.
But like you said, I think our season was late. I don't know. I just think everything's late this year.
Well, and I also have to wonder if part of it is, you know, they've been cooped up so much. Mm-hmm. Is it just because they don't really have anything else to do? Let's just, you know, kind of raise queens.
Yeah, and they're so confined in there that they have that sensation of overcrowding, whereas on a nice sunny day they're out flying and
it wasn't this weekend, but the previous weekend we had lows in the 40s.
Yeah, Dwayne, so to your question, does knocking down the queen cells prevent swarming, or will they keep trying and trying?
Yes, they'll keep trying.
What does Cheryl say?
Dwayne, one time I had one in the backyard, and it's about 7 o'clock one evening, and we're enjoying some iced tea, and all the bees are really busy. This was, I don't know, it was late May. I was trying to remember what time of year it was. We had nectar flow coming in, And all the colonies were really busy. And I looked out and this one just wasn't hardly doing anything. They're just hanging around, lazy, fat, and sassy. And I told my husband, I said, there's swarm cells in that colony. And he goes, why you say that? And I said, because they're the only ones that aren't busy in the yard. So I decided to walk down there and tear into them. And yeah, there were swarm cells and they weren't capped. You're going to ask me what day. I mean, they were within a few, probably 3 days of being capped. I tore every one out. I was running a single deep. I swear I didn't miss anything. There was 3 supers, 3 drawn supers on top of this colony. I had to unstack all of them to get down in the box, cut everything out. Queen's there, she's marked. Next day, I'm out in the yard. It's about 9:30 in the morning and all this noise and commotion. And that hive I was just in the night before flew to the top of the Austrian pine. So I went in. They had reconstructed swarm cells. They had laid an egg in it the night before. They swarmed with that. So I never say never in beekeeping that they won't do that.
But another thing to caution is if you know your hive has swarmed, then don't go in and kill and tear out all your
Right.
queen cells.
Right.
And that's really common for new beekeepers is your hive swarms. Well, if you kill all your swarm cells, knock them all out, then your hive is now hopelessly queenless.
Well, and I think
Yeah.
this is Becky. I got on late, but this is an interesting topic. I think that new beekeepers may not have seen the swarm, miss the swarm, get into the colony, see advanced queen cells, maybe capped, maybe not, and go, yeah, I caught it in time. I'm going to cut them out because this hive has so many bees, it couldn't possibly swarm. Yes, it did.
Yeah, they
And
can still swarm.
there's just that many. The latest stuff that we have read really talks an awful lot about the distribution of queen pheromone as being extremely important to swarm behavior. And so 2 things, you've got an older queen, a second-year queen, she probably has slightly less queen pheromone available in the hive, but also that distribution when they're packed in there on those nasty days, that pheromone doesn't get distributed throughout. So all of that. Good luck.
Have they ever done studies on how often those swarm queens are superseded after they swarm?
Oh, somebody probably has, but I haven't heard of it.
Even if they were like a first year queen. Now I had a first year queen swarm last year and she was still in the hive this year because I mean I had her marked, but it seems like on those older queens, like second year queen or older, that they're trying to supersede her pretty routinely.
That's a good point. That is a valid point.
I don't necessarily try to cut those cells out when I see those kind of cells getting built in a swarm that I caught that's got an older queen, because they're probably trying to replace her. And they may not swarm when those emerge.
The general rule is that we tell people if we see the queen cells capped or nearly capped,
right, it's a go.
You know, definitely don't remove them. You can remove some of them, but leave when, you know, if you've got 14 or 15,
yeah,
it may help eliminate the possibility of a secondary swarm.
Yeah.
If you cut it down to maybe 5. Well,
you definitely know what their intentions are. Let me see that.
Jerry Sellers made a comment on here now. Both of our swarms went to the same tree, but extremely high, too high to get to. Does anyone have a recommendation on how to get them to swarm to lower branches? I read about a product called QMP, that's Queen Mandibular Pheromone, and don't know if anyone has used it. My first comment would be that if they swarm in April, the leaves aren't out very well, they always tend to land low. If the leaves are out. Later April, May, they go high because they want to be up where the sun warms. Anybody else?
They like to swarm to evergreens because they get wind and protection and the cruddy April weather. They tend to swarm to the conifers more, I think, than they do as the season rolls on. I have a bee tree and they swarm repeatedly, and I think it's the leftover queen pheromone from other swarms going there. But yeah, it's not very good when it's at the top of the tree.
Yeah, these both swarmed to a oak tree that had been trimmed, a neighbor's oak. Luckily, the neighbor that likes bees, not the neighbor that doesn't like bees. But yeah, it was too high to get to.
Matt Brandis is probably going to patent his Christmas tree, and you might try putting that about 25 yards from the hive that you're concerned about and see how that works for you.
Yeah, to Cheryl's point, I always find that the bees will always find a cedar tree to swarm into because it's, the hardest to get them out of a lot of times. And so I had a theory that every spring you should just park a fake Christmas tree in front of every one of your hives. And I have I mentioned earlier, I had an observation hive and I knew it was going to swarm, but I was going to let it. I wasn't trying to control it. And so I parked a fake plastic Christmas tree about 20 feet in front of the entrance and they swarmed right into it. So now the second swarm that they cast off, well, she didn't fly. I'm going to guess I think she just walked out and clung to the entrance, but because I wanted the same thing. I didn't want them flying into one of the other trees. Jerry, were there other trees that they could have swarmed into?
But we're in
exact same spot.
We're in Prairie Village, and so lots of trees. But yeah, they went, if not the same branch, they went to the adjacent branch, but it's probably 35 feet up in the air.
Yeah, and I think back to Cheryl's point, there's some leftover pheromone smell that probably attracts them to it. I mean, you could probably, I don't know, the QMP is usually used when you're trying to hold or keep the bees from going into a letting worker scenario. It's more about trying to simulate that there's a queen in the hive. You might look at something more like Swarm Commander.
Well, and we use that. We had a hive right underneath where the swarm was. Like, hey guys, come down here.
Well, we have a bait hive, which leads to another question. I hate to monopolize this, but this is weird because that bait hive, I mean, it had one like old drawn frame in it that I put in it to attract them. And bees are constantly in there, just hanging out, even at night. Like I'll open the lid and they're in there, but it's not a colony. It's just they hang out in there.
I don't think that you would necessarily get them to swarm directly. I don't know. You might, I guess, before I say it. I was going to say get them to swarm directly into a bait hive.
Yeah, and as an off lure, that would help a lot better.
We use just lemongrass because I use that in some of my soaps, and it won't move a swarm, but from a high branch to another. Though Pete Fish has said that a swarm was too high, and so we put pheromone on a lower branch and they went to it. I don't know if that's true, but I find that when we're catching a swarm, if we use that lemongrass or the swarm pheromone, whatever, on a little tissue or something near the entrance, it'll help them settle down faster. But I don't know that it attracts them or anything, but we do use it to get a swarm to settle in a little faster, but I don't know.
And I always tell people not to cut branches. If you have a swarm, even if it's a lower branch and it's real easy to cut it, to dump it into the hive, I don't ever cut branches. I like to leave them because I think you get other swarms into that same spot. So I'm not one to cut branches.
And people have put on the club Facebook that they've taken their shotguns and shot branches off.
We've seen videos too.
They would live long and prosper if Cecil said.
I was going to try my baseball skills and see if I could hit the branch to jar them loose, but I didn't want to try that either.
You can cast, you can take a fishing line and cast over the branch.
Jerry, how high is high?
Robert, I think it was probably 35 feet.
Okay.
Robert, it's the one you tried to get.
Oh, yeah, that's more like 50 feet, I think.
Oh, all right.
Just barely beyond pole reach.
Yeah.
Were you
Yeah.
standing in the back of the pickup when you did the pole though?
No.
No,
Okay, and no ladder in the back of the pickup and the pole?
no. It was
Okay.
that we were in between the sides of homes. So, and the tree was in the backyard.
And
And there
I
was
do
a-
want to add, you need to be cautious. We knew of a beekeeper who broke his back trying to get a swarm out of a really high tree.
Yeah, there's no reason to risk your life to try to get a swarm. Just come over
As
to
I
my,
say to my
come over to my
husband all
house.
the time, it does no good.
You can just come over to my house and get one. You
Yeah.
don't have to.
I get in enough trouble for cleaning the gutters in my house. So
No, and me too.
Yeah, that's true.
I had a swarm yesterday in a tree. It wasn't terribly tall, but I threw a rope around it and used the golf cart to pull it down.
A golf cart?
Yeah, I tied the rope to the golf cart and just pulled the tree over so I could get close to it.
I'm going to do speaker view, everyone. I'll just take down the PowerPoint so we can all see each other and visit that way.
So
It sounds like I hear lightning outside. We're going to have a storm here soon.
Oh, it's sunny here.
We got sunshine, but I saw some thunderstorms look off to the northeast.
Yeah, I'm
Quad City.
looking north here. It's big clouds, so I'm not surprised you're seeing something, Robert. But it's
So
sunny here too.
I joined you guys late. Did you talk about the fun day as you started this today?
We did a little bit. I've shown a few of the pictures of the ice cream.
Yeah, I saw that and a little bit of working. Just if you missed it, mark your calendar now for next year. That you should make that a huge priority for you. I think it's just phenomenal. But just a couple of things that had occurred to me as I was looking at pictures. And one, our hives are going to be getting significantly stronger. They will continue to do so. And then later this month, we'll probably have some dearth happen. And guess what? They won't be nice hives. They will begin to be really very defensive. And so as I was looking at pictures of the fun day, our at the hive with Christy Sanderson. Christy is a perfect example of do as I say, not as I do. And I would like to encourage everyone, and just more than encourage, don't do that. Don't work your bees without a veil. Don't work your bees ever without a veil. Because you don't know what day you're going to go out there and they will just blow up on you. And Christy accepts that risk. And I wish for Fun Day she would wear a veil, because so many people are paying attention to what she's doing and not necessarily what is being said. But as they get stronger, as they enter a dearth, lots of things can happen, and those bees can get very defensive very, very quickly. So just all of you stay safe and wear your veils. So those are my points for the day. Mark your calendar for next year because it was phenomenal. Jay Francis is on tonight. He and his crew just did a marvelous job. It was, I don't know how it could have been better, except for just maybe not a little rain in the middle of the afternoon. But other than that, just super, super good. And I'm not sure Doreen is probably doing much of anything but still recuperating. That woman was a dynamo. She just really did a great job too. So his wife Doreen was a great help. So
she's awake now. Becky, she's
Yeah,
awake now.
we'll tell her we are thinking of her, and that if she was still sleeping, I wouldn't hold it against her at all. But
She's still pretty groggy.
well, it does just. I'm sorry. I wish I could tell her something else, but the older that she gets, it's probably not going to get better, because boy, I have those days and it just zaps me. So anyway, thanks for coming if you came. And if you didn't get to this year, mark it for next year. All good.
So beside having other activities, maybe some of you could share why you didn't come. If you cared enough to be on the Q&A and learn about bees, why were you not at the fun day?
We are starting a flower farm, and we are in peak flower farm mode right now. So that's why we weren't there. We did contribute to Fun Day, but you have to choose one or the other. But no, the name of the company is called Village Bee LLC. So
good.
The master gardeners were there with us yesterday, and they were busy, and they had all kinds of pollinator plants there that honestly, and then we had another vendor there from Morford Lavender Farm. Only I think it's now Elam Lavender Farm.
Yeah.
And they were selling things. So you might have enjoyed us as well. That might have been good for you. But you have finite hours, and that's what you have to do.
Did people notice we didn't get a blackberry winter this year? We call the time of year when the blackberries are in bloom a blackberry winter because it's kind of a dearth. And we didn't have it. The yellow sweet clover was in bloom, started blooming while the blackberries were in bloom, which was, I thought it was kind of bizarre. So kind of a different.
Yeah, it was a strange spring.
All about weather. All
It
about,
still
yeah.
is.
Exactly.
Well, for us not attending, we had just come off a travel day, and with two of us, $75 times two was like, I don't think we could spend the whole day. So that's why we chose not to, just because mostly we were exhausted, but times two, it seemed like a little much for us for the day.
Yeah, I wondered if cost had kept quite a few people away, but you just have to decide what your priorities are.
Mexico or Fun Day? Mexico or Fun Day?
Tough call.
Let alone the problems with all the planes and the flights.
Oh, you guys, the poor speakers. It's made me never want to fly again. They both had problems with every single one of their flights and every single leg of their flights, including when they flew out on Sunday. It was just a nightmare. They are so to be commended. And
so was it Jay that didn't get to leave until like
he left at 5:30 last night, and we had checked their flight before they left the hotel because we thought while we're sitting here, we could, find them new flights, do whatever we had to do. He got there. They got ready to load the plane. Their flight was canceled, and they told him he wouldn't get out till tomorrow. So this morning, and he got on his phone and he got a flight out on Southwest. So, but it's like you just have to be a computer guru to even travel anymore. I mean, I
think that's just for today. I don't think that's going to carry on into the distant future. So I don't think we need to worry about that for next year. I believe this is all going to pass. Things will settle back out again, and it won't be this bad again. But yes, all those things right now are a terrible issue. It's not fun. We got in our bed at 1:30 in the morning on Friday morning. So it was like, I don't think we're going to make Fun Day.
They're having pilot shortages. They're and the federal government would have to make some changes either to allow pilots to be older before they have to be retired. 60, I think, is the cutoff age now. And then they were also talking less hours, flight hours before they certify them. So who knows where that'll go. Hopefully it's not as bad next year.
I don't think it'll be as bad as next year. I think next year we're gonna work. I mean, so many things have just been so different for all of us that we're getting used to new things and things will shake out. But look, consider this year versus last year. You know, we got to have Fun Day. Didn't have it last year, right?
Correct.
So
did
next
by
year
Zoom,
it'll be different, but there'll be new challenges, but different. And it may not be travel, it'll be something else. So we just have to adapt.
Hope you're right. Hope you're right.
Things have to get better, including the weather.
Good luck on that.
We'll see how it goes. I'm not sure. I'm getting severe thunderstorm warnings right now. So
Oh my goodness. We got
Yeah, the
nothing.
sun's still out here. Yeah.
Yeah.
Now you could go out and work your bees.
Joey's 20 miles south of me, so. But
I need to go pick up a swarm. So
oh, did you
yeah.
catch it already, or just picking it up?
Yeah, just picking it up, waiting for everybody to go home. It was one of those way too high up. You're right. The later the season, the higher they go, and on a huge big limb. And Steve used 4 poles on his bucket to catch it. And we kind of were able to scoop up a pretty good quantity of bees, and manipulating that pole was just crazy, but we got it, dumped them into the box. And then we went up for kind of a second scoop, got that, put them in the box. And I just looked at how many bees were still in that tree and was like, oh, that was worthless. We didn't do anything. And I sat for about 30 minutes and watched them. And I got to watch that swarm break up in the tree and fly down and come in my box. And that was a pretty cool thing to watch.
Wow.
Excellent.
So do you like to get your swarms in the evening after the sun sets, or do you like to go early in the morning and pick them up?
Oh, we will do either one, but since the sun rises awfully early now, so I really we tend to kind of do it at night when it gets to be that the sun rises.
We have a line of thunderstorms out in western Kansas, and Ken tells me we're going to have rain in the morning. We like to move bees in the rain, but I'm not sure I want to be out there if it's lightning.
That might be challenging. Yeah.
Cheryl, you're still used to getting up early.
Oh, I'm up. We're up. He's
Yeah,
leaving
you
for
are.
Stillwater in the morning, so we'll probably be up and out the door at 5:30.
Not me. I'm going to be in bed thinking of you.
So Becky, something to try next time. I don't know if you're willing to do this. I did try it on one. Sean Emery actually recommended this, is if you put a frame of brood in your bucket, and then
in the bucket.
In the bucket.
In the bucket.
Yeah, take a frame of brood and put it in the bucket. I would probably think like open brood. And then you just hold, he said, if you just hold it up there, particularly like on those really, really high ones where it's hard to manipulate, 40 feet of pole, because then you got to like get it down to dump it. I tried it on a swarm and it worked really well until I knocked all the bees off of the off. But I just held it up there, and they'll just immediately crawl right down onto that brood.
Oh, well, I don't know why Sean Emery only told you and didn't share that with us. That's
there
an
you go.
awesome idea. Okay.
But I think for those really high ones like that you can't hit, because normally like the big branch that you can't smack it, is just pull out a brood out of a box somewhere and put it in there and run it up and just hold it up under there. And I think if you can hold it there for 3 or 4 minutes.
You can hold it's the thing. Geez.
When I had a big one that was just a little bit out of reach in my bee tree when it was so windy, I think they were just looking for a way down any way, shape or form they could, and they were all wrapped around the trunk. I just held frames up against the main trunk at the highest point of the cluster, and they crawled right on the frames, and I handed all 10 that way. That took a whole bunch of that swarm down, because they were all on frames by that time. Then they're all standing. So, yeah, sometimes they like crawling on just the foundation. But
Yeah.
yeah, I bet open brood would really get them.
Well, that's a great hint. So, well, Steve, I think is gonna go get that swarm. So I came late, I'm gonna leave early. So we're gonna
No, it's-
go pick that up. So
I
you
got
guys
to go
have a-
pick one up too, but I'm going to wait another hour. It's not dark
All right.
enough yet.
Ours
Yeah.
is a 30-minute drive away, so we've got a
Oh.
little bit of time in there. So you guys have a good night and see you next time.